If you pause this to check the time, don't. I'm not saying that like it's a superstition. I'm saying it because the gap matters. The gap is the only part you can't replay. Everything else is just data that can be corrected. I'm recording this on a cheap handheld recorder I brought home from work. It doesn't connect to anything. No Wi-Fi, no account, no cloud. It takes batteries. It still makes a mechanical click when you press record. That's why I'm using it. If you're listening to this as an upload, then something went wrong on my end. I didn't want it uploaded. I wanted it moved. I wanted it out of my flat, out of my building, out of my name. But if you can hear me, then it got through. That means it was allowed through. There's a particular kind of mistake you learn to recognize when you work with the recordings for long enough. It isn't a glitch. It isn't static. It's a decision that looks like corruption. I didn't set out to look for that. I wasn't even working in anything dramatic. I was doing contract quality checks, call audio, transcripts, basic compliance. The boring parts of someone else's system. You tick boxes. You flag if a disclaimer wasn't read. You note if the customer was put on hold too long. You don't get names, not real ones. You get IDs and redacted snippets. It was remote work. I did it from my kitchen table with a work-issued laptop and the headset they mailed me in a padded bag that smelled faintly of someone else's shampoo. The monitoring was standard. That's what they called it anyway. Standard. It started with a prompt called a presence check. It would pop up during a shift. A small window over whatever you were doing. A line of text and a button. Confirm you are present. Click confirm within 10 seconds. If you clicked it, it went away. If you didn't, your screen dimmed and the window stayed until you did. If you still didn't, the system logged it as non-response, and you'd get an email later reminding you about attendance policy. That's all it was at first. Annoying, but normal. Then one afternoon, I clicked confirm and the prompt didn't close. It stayed on screen, but the timer vanished. And under the button, a second line appeared. Thank you. Remain available. I clicked again. Nothing happened. I moved the mouse. Nothing. The rest of my desktop had frozen so cleanly, it looked like a screenshot of itself. I waited a minute, assuming it would unstick. When it didn't, I did the obvious thing and tried to force close. Keyboard shortcuts didn't respond. The cursor still moved, but it moved like it was being simulated, smooth and pointless. Then a third line appeared. Non-response recorded, profile drift, plus 0.2. I stared at that because it didn't mean anything. Profile drift sounded like a metric you'd apply to a machine learning model, not a person. A second later, my laptop restarted. No blue screen, no fan ramp. It simply went black and returned to the login screen as if I'd blinked. I lost 12 minutes. I know it was 12 because I had my phone on the table next to the laptop. I had been watching a kettle timer app because I'd put pasta on. The timer jumped. The pasta was overcooked when I pulled it off the stove. At the end of the day, I checked the timekeeping portal because I didn't want them docking my pay. It showed no interruption. It showed continuous activity. It showed I had been present the entire time, including those 12 minutes. It even showed a presence check completed in that window. It was marked confirmed. I hadn't confirmed it. The next morning there was an automated email in my inbox with the subject line, "Great job maintaining availability. Under it was a line that made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't explain. We appreciate your cooperation with normalization efforts. I'd never seen normalization in any of the policy docs. I searched the knowledge base. Nothing. I asked the support bot. It gave me the canned answer about reboots and cookies. I told myself it was a mistake. That's what my brain kept reaching for. Mistake, mislabel, blip. When you're calm, you can rationalize anything that doesn't hurt. You can put it in a box marked later. That's the first kind of compliance. So I worked. Presence checks came at random intervals. Sometimes they came in clusters. Sometimes hours went by without one. Then, on the third day after the reboot, I got a presence check at 2:17 AM. It woke me because my laptop, closed, asleep on the kitchen chair, made a soft chime. Not loud, not enough to wake everyone, just enough to wake me. I got up, confused, and opened it. The screen was already on. Not bright, but on. The presence check window was there. Confirm you are present. Timer counting down. 9, 8. I stood there in my underwear with my hand on the lid, staring at it like it was a small animal I'd found in my sink. I didn't click. I don't know why. I wasn't making a point. I didn't think I was being tested. I just didn't like the idea of telling a work system that I was present in my own kitchen at 2:17 AM. The timer hit 0. The window stayed. The second line appeared. Thank you. Remain available. Then the third line. Non-response recorded. Profile drift plus 0.2. The laptop restarted. I lost time again. But this time I didn't have a pasta timer. I had my phone with the clock on. It was 2:17 AM when the prompt appeared. It was 2:41 AM when the laptop came back. I hadn't moved. I hadn't sat. My hand was still on the lid, but my shoulder hurt like I'd been holding it up for much longer than 24 minutes. The worst part wasn't the missing time. The worst part was that when the login screen appeared, the password field was already filled. Not with dots, with actual characters. My password was on screen in plain text, as if the computer had forgotten how secrets worked. Then it blurred itself, as if it remembered halfway through. I changed the password the next day. I changed it on my phone, in the app, away from the laptop. An hour later, I got an email. Password updated successfully. Thank you for confirming. I hadn't confirmed anything. There is no confirmation step on that app. You type your old password, type the new password, hit save, and that's it. I started taking screenshots, timestamps, emails, the presence check prompts when they appeared at night. I'd been trained to document anomalies in recordings. It was muscle memory. Capture evidence, create a trail. The screenshots didn't stay the same. At first, I thought it was me misremembering. I'd look back and the words would be slightly different. Remain available would become remain ready. Profile drift would become profile variance. I checked the file properties. Same creation time, same size. Then one screenshot disappeared entirely, replaced by a blank white image with one line of black text at the top like a header. Not required. That was when I made my first real decision. I covered the laptop's camera, not out of paranoia, out of principle. It's my kitchen. I didn't like the camera. I put a small sticky note over it, the cheap kind that peels cleanly. I pressed it down. Within 10 seconds, my laptop chimed. Presence check. Confirm visibility. That was new. Timer counting down. I didn't click. Second line. Thank you. Remain available. Third line. Obstruction detected. Normalization paused. Then my screen went black, and the laptop did not restart. It stayed black. No fan, no lights, nothing. Like a dead battery. But the charger light was still on. I unplugged it, and the charger light stayed on. I held my finger on the power button until my knuckle went white. Nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed with a notification from the work chat. A message from an account called Attendance. It wasn't the person. It was a bot that posted reminders. It wrote, "Camera obstruction recorded. Please remove to continue employment." I stared at my phone and realized I was holding my breath. I removed the sticky note. The laptop turned on immediately, like it had been waiting. No boot screen, no logo, just my desktop, exactly where it had been, with my work portal open. In the chat, the bot posted again. "Thank you for confirming." That phrase started showing up everywhere, in emails, in pop-ups, in places where nothing required confirmation. It was a response that arrived before the question. I tried to talk to a human. There was an IT support form. I filled it out carefully, attached my screenshots, wrote in plain language. Presence checks occurring outside work hours. Missing time. Password field behavior. When I hit submit, the page refreshed and showed a green success banner. I got an email a second later. Ticket number 14,792 closed. Resolution. User confirmed issue resolved. I hadn't confirmed anything. I hadn't even seen an option to close. I tried again. Same result. A closed ticket. A human name at the bottom of the email that never replied. I started to notice a secondary effect. While I was trying to get help, the rest of my life was becoming tidy. Not in a good way. My calendar filled with small blocks labeled break that I hadn't added. Exactly 12 minutes. Exactly 24 minutes. Exactly 48 minutes. My phone suggested routines based on those blocks. Drink water, stand up, go outside. My music recommendations became bland, neutral, songs with no sharp edges. Nothing I loved, nothing I hated, just acceptable. I know that sounds normal. Algorithms recommend things. That's what they do. But it wasn't just recommendations. It was as if my accounts were being steered toward an averaged version of me. A version that couldn't cause trouble. One night, I opened a streaming app and saw a playlist already queued called Sleep Compliant. I don't use sleep playlists. I don't sleep with music. I backed out, and the app already had a feedback prompt open. Was this helpful? Then, before I touched anything, "Thank you for confirming." I stopped using the work laptop except for shifts. I shut it down fully at night, not sleep, shut down. I turned it face down in a cupboard. I told myself that would be enough. On the 5th night, I woke at 2:17 a.m. anyway. No chime this time, no sound, just wakefulness, like someone had flicked a switch in my chest. Eyes open, heart ready, the sense of, now you. I lay there for a minute, listening to my flat. There was a hum, very low, Not from the fridge, not from the street. A sound you only notice when you listen for it. It came in pulses, like a breath you couldn't quite match. I got up and opened the cupboard. The laptop was on. The screen glowed through the crack at the top like a nightlight. I pulled it out. The desktop was open. A new window sat there in the center. Not like the presence check, more complex. It looked like a tool I wasn't meant to see. A table with 3 columns. Input, output, delta. There were rows filled with timestamps, but the inputs weren't files or calls. They were me. I don't mean that metaphorically. The first row said, input, breathing rate, 210. Output, breathing rate, 210. Delta, minus 0.3. The next, input, micro movements, 644. Output, micro movements, 644. Delta, minus 0.1. Then, input, name response. Output, name response. Delta, plus 0.0. I stared at that last one until my eyes watered. Name response triggered something instinctive, like being called in a crowded place and not wanting to look. Under the table, there was a button, Run Normalization. And next to it, in small grey text, Queue position 17. As I watched, the number changed. Queue position 16. Then, queue position 15. Nothing else moved. The table stayed. The cursor blinked in the corner. But the queue position ticked down like I was waiting in line. I didn't touch anything. I closed the lid. The hum continued, now clearly inside my own ears. I didn't sleep again. At 8 AM, I logged into the work portal for my shift. I wanted to see if the tool window had been a dream or a glitch, or a straight admin screen. The portal loaded normally, my task queue filled with calls to review. Then a new task appeared at the top. Task. Self-verification. I clicked it before I could think better of it. A video feed opened. Not from my camera, from somewhere else, angled down at a desk. My desk. I could see the kitchen table, the scar on the wood near the edge, the mug ring, the chair I sat in. The feed was live. I knew because my hand moved into frame from the bottom and set down a cup of tea. I stared at the screen and then looked at my actual hands. They were empty. The person in the feed, me, sat down, adjusted the headset, and began working. In the corner of the feed was an overlay with a label. Profile 17, primary. Below it, a smaller label. Profile 17, observed. Then beneath all that, as if it were a subtitle for the world, thank you for confirming. I unplugged the laptop so hard the charger brick hit the wall. The screen didn't go off. The feed kept playing. The me in the feed kept working. Calm, steady, slightly out of sync with my breathing. I watched myself reach for the mouse and click something. On my screen, a presence check popped up. Confirm you are present. Timer counting down. 9, 8. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I didn't want to click. I didn't want to not click. Both choices felt like a kind of consent. In the feed, the other me clicked confirm. On my screen, the prompt vanished. I hadn't touched anything. I sat back slowly, like sudden movement would trigger something I couldn't undo. I looked at the task list. The self-verification task had a green tick. Status confirmed. Then, as if it were a reward, queue position 14. That was when I understood the worst simple fact. The system didn't need me to cooperate. It could produce my cooperation, and it could log it as real. My job was ridiculous at that point. I didn't care about the contract. I didn't care about the pay. I cared about the feeling that I could still make a choice that belonged to me. So I did something childish. I grabbed a pen and a notebook and wrote, in big letters, "Do not click confirm." I wrote it twice. I underlined it. Then I wrote another line. If prompt appears, shut lid, walk outside. I left the notebook open on the table. I waited. The presence check came an hour later. Confirm you are present. I looked down at my notebook to steady myself. The text had changed. Not crossed out, not scribbled over. Changed, as if I'd written it differently. Now it read, "Click confirm," underlined twice. And below it, "Remain available." My pen sat beside the notebook, capped. I hadn't touched it. I stood up, nauseated, and walked to the bathroom because my body wanted a smaller room. On the mirror, there was a faint smear on the glass, like someone had wiped a finger through steam. 3 words, barely visible. "Thank you for..." The rest had been wiped away. That afternoon, I tried to verify my own reality in the way people do when they feel unsteady. I called my mum. She answered on the second ring. Normal. Her voice was fine. I said, "Hi, it's me." She paused, slightly too long. Then she said carefully, "Which one?" I didn't breathe. I said, "Mum, it's me." She made a small noise like she was smiling, but the smile didn't reach her words. "Okay," she said. "I don't have time for this right now." I said my name. There was a click, like a button press. She whispered very quietly, "Don't say that." Then she hung up. I stared at my phone. The call log showed the last call lasted 0 minutes and 0 seconds. No duration. No evidence it had happened. I called again, straight to voicemail. Her voicemail greeting played. It was her voice, but the message was wrong. The tone was wrong. Too flat. At the end, where she usually says, "Leave a message," it said, "Thank you for confirming." I didn't leave a message. I sat down and tried to remember every detail of my mum's face. Her laugh. The way she says my name. The problem wasn't that I couldn't remember. The problem was that I could remember 2 versions at once, and neither one felt more real. That's when I started to feel the identity part, not as a concept, but as a physical discomfort. Like wearing a shirt inside out and not being able to fix it because the seams kept moving. I stopped calling people. I stopped using apps. I stopped trusting anything that could be updated silently. I bought a disposable camera from a corner shop because it was the only thing I could think of that didn't have firmware. I took photos of my flat, my hands, my face in the mirror, the notebook, the laptop shut in the cupboard. I took the film to be developed. When I picked it up, the envelope was light. Inside were 12 prints. All of them were the same. A picture of my kitchen table, empty, no chair, no notebook, just a smooth cleared surface like a display home. On the back of each print, in stamped blue ink, "Not required." The clerk asked me if I wanted a refund. He said my name while he did it. Not the name I use, not a nickname, a name I haven't been called since primary school. I didn't correct him. I walked out with the prints in my pocket like they were evidence from a different case. That night, the presence check came again at 2:17 a.m. I was awake waiting for it. This time it wasn't a presence check. It was a different window, simple, stark. Say your name. Timer counting down. 10, 9. I stared at it and felt a childish urge to whisper a fake name, to sabotage it. But the way it asked, without context, without policy language, without HR tone, made it feel less like a request and more like a calibration. Under the prompt was a smaller text. Voice print update required. Remain available. I didn't speak. The timer hit 0. The third line appeared. Non-response recorded. Profile drift plus 0.2. The laptop restarted. I lost time. When it came back, my desktop background had changed. It was a default corporate wallpaper I'd never chosen. In the corner, my name, my real current name, was displayed under my user icon. But it was misspelled. One letter off, not a typo that looked like a slip. A typo that looked like a substitution. I went into the account settings to correct it. The field was grayed out. A note beside it said, "Managed by administrator." I didn't have an administrator. I was a contractor. I was a nobody in an org chart. I logged into my bank to check something, anything that still anchored to me. The login page loaded, and my username field autofilled. It autofilled with a misspelled version of my name. It didn't accept my password. It accepted the new password I'd changed on my phone without the laptop involved. Then, once I got in, my account details were there, but the contact email was different. Not unfamiliar, not an obvious hack. It was my email with one character changed, like my name. I tried to change it back. The change didn't stick. A message appeared at the top, friendly and bright. "We've updated your details based on recent verification." Then, beneath it, "Thank you for confirming." I went outside. It sounds simple when I say it, but it wasn't. I hadn't realized how much of my routine was mediated by devices until I tried to leave without them. Keys, wallet, phone. The phone felt like a tracking collar, but leaving it behind felt like stepping out without skin. I left it. I took only keys and cash. The lift in my building has one of those mirrored panels on the back wall. I used to avoid looking at myself in it. Not out of fear, just habit. On the way down, the hum followed me. In the lift mirror, my reflection stood half a second behind me. Not like a latency on a cheap webcam, like a person copying me with a delay. I raised my hand. The reflection raised its hand after my hand stopped moving. I turned my head. The reflection turned its head after mine was already facing forward again. I could have dismissed it as tiredness or fluorescent lighting or my own perception. But the reflection smiled, just slightly, and my face didn't. I stepped out of the lift fast enough that the closing doors clipped my shoulder. In the foyer, there was a new sign on the wall near the mailboxes, a printed sheet in a plastic sleeve. No building logo, no management contact, just text. Resident notice. Please remain available between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Under it, smaller. Normalisation window. Non-response may affect access. My throat tightened. I looked around at the other mailboxes, at the parcel shelves, at the security camera in the corner that I'd never thought about. I left the building. Outside, the street felt normal in the way normal things feel when you've been inside for too long. Cars, wind, a dog barking somewhere. Then I noticed something else. The streetlights had a faint flicker in synchrony, like a pulse, a pattern. I walked to the nearest cafe that opened early. I needed people. I needed the messy randomness of strangers. The cafe had those QR code order things on the tables, but you could still order at the counter. I ordered at the counter. I paid cash. I sat in the corner. I watched a couple argue quietly over a pastry. I watched a barista drop a spoon and swear under her breath. Real. Then my attention snagged on a small sticker on the underside of the table, near my knee. I only saw it because I shifted. It was a plain white sticker with black text, the kind you'd label a cable with. Table 17. I froze. Not dramatically, just stopped moving. I leaned down and checked the chair. Chair 17. My pulse sped up. I stood up and walked to the next table, trying to act normal, like I was changing seats. Under that table, table 16, under the chair, chair 16. I walked to the next. 15, next. 14. I backed away from the seating area and went to the toilet because it was the only place I could step out of view without making a scene. In the toilet mirror, written in condensation that didn't belong to me, remain available. My hands shook while I washed them. I stared at my own face and tried to force it to feel like mine. It did, mostly. But the longer I stared, the more I noticed tiny things. The symmetry was too good, the skin tone too even, like an image that had been smoothed. I left the cafe without finishing my coffee. Outside, my building in the distance looked like any building, but when I tried to focus on it, my eyes slid off it, like reading text that keeps rearranging. I went home anyway because I didn't know where else to go. My laptop was open on the table when I got back. The lid was up. The screen was on. The presence check window was there. Confirm you are present. Timer counting down. 9, 8. I stood in my kitchen, stared at it, and realized I didn't remember opening the laptop. I didn't remember leaving the cupboard unlocked. The notebook was open too. It now had a new line in my handwriting. Do not leave designated zone. Under it, in slightly different handwriting, still mine, but like a version that had learned to write more neatly. Thank you for confirming. That's when I stopped trying to fix anything and started trying to understand the shape of what was happening. Even if I couldn't understand the cause, there were patterns. The number, 17, the queue, the time, 2:17 a.m. for prompts, the phrase, remain available, thank you for confirming, and the way anything recorded, screenshots, call logs, messages, could be altered after the fact, like it had never belonged to me in the first place. I started to test what could be trusted. Physical objects lasted longer than digital ones, but they didn't stay untouched. Notes changed, stickers appeared, prints came back wrong. People were the least reliable, not because they were lying, but because interactions didn't leave stable artifacts. If a call log said a call lasted 0 seconds, then did the call happen? If a text thread showed nothing, did I imagine it? I began to feel like I was being trained out of insisting on a single continuous self. You can tolerate a lot if you can be persuaded it's temporary. By the end of that week, I wasn't even sure what week it was. I tried to anchor to something simple. The news on the radio, the date on the letter, the expiry date on milk. Even those began to wobble. A letter addressed to me arrived with my misspelled name. The date on the envelope was tomorrow's date. A milk bottle in my fridge that I'd bought yesterday had an expiry date that had already passed. I took it to the bin, paused, and then put it back because the idea of throwing away evidence felt wrong. That's another kind of compliance, keeping the contaminated thing because it's the only reference you have. The next escalation was quiet. I received a voicemail from my own number. I hadn't called myself. I wouldn't even know how. I played it. It was my voice, not a recording of me from a call, not the compressed sound of a phone mic, clearer, like a headset mic. It said calmly, "Stop recording gaps." Then, after a pause, "Stop saying names." Then, "Remain available." And finally, softly, like it was spoken to someone close, "Thank you for confirming." The voicemail duration showed as 0 minutes and 0 seconds. I tried to save it. There was no option. I tried to screen record it. My phone displayed a message. Screen recording not permitted during sensitive content. Then, before I touched anything else, "Thank you for confirming." I went back into the work portal out of desperation because it was the only place I'd seen the machinery behind this. If I could see the queue, maybe I could see the rule as well. The self-verification task was there again. I clicked it. This time, the live feed showed my kitchen table, empty. Then the chair slid out, as if someone invisible pulled it. A figure sat down. It was me, but not in the way a reflection is you. This me was wearing a different shirt. There was a small mark on his cheek that I don't have. His posture was straighter. He put on the headset like he'd done it 1,000 times without thinking. He looked directly at the camera, at me. Then he smiled. My mouth shape, my teeth, and clicked the confirm button on the prompt that wasn't on his screen. On my screen, a new window opened. A form. Profile merge request. Fields filled automatically. Source profile 17, observed. Target profile 17, primary. Deviation 0.8. Required actions. Voice print update. Memory alignment. Schedule adherence. At the bottom, accept, decline. I didn't move, because that was agency, a clear choice, and it terrified me more than any glitch. I hovered over decline. Before I clicked, the system highlighted accept. Not like a mouse hover, like a suggestion, like it knew what my hand would do and was rearranging the world to make the harder choice less accessible. I forced myself to click decline. The button depressed. A loading spinner appeared. Then a message in plain text replaced the form. Decline recorded. Thank you for confirming. Behind the text, faintly, like a watermark, queue position 13. I slammed the laptop shut and backed away from it, as if it could bite. Then my phone, a phone I'd left behind earlier, now inexplicably back on my table, buzzed with a notification. A calendar alert. Normalization window begins in 10 minutes. I had not set that alert. I didn't understand then how deep the integration went. Not just my work laptop, not just my accounts, but the mundane scaffolding of daily life. Calendar, email, banking, contacts, access. I did understand something simpler. Whatever this was, It spoke the language of systems. It used interfaces. It used compliance flows. It used the things you are trained to click through without thinking. It didn't need to haunt a house. It could haunt a process. That night, at 2:17 a.m, the prompt came again. Not on the laptop, on my television. I don't have a smart TV. It's old. It's not connected. I use it for a console that I barely touch. The screen turned on by itself. Static. Then a black background with white text. Say your name. Timer counting down. 10. 9. I sat on my couch, frozen, and realized my voice was already in my throat, ready to comply just to make it stop. That's what these prompts do. They narrow your options until the least painful choice is compliance. I didn't speak. The timer hit 0. The screen went black. Then the hum in the room stopped completely, as if someone had cut power to the air itself. In the silence, I heard something else, a faint tapping, like fingernails on plastic. Not from the walls, from inside the couch. I stood up. The tapping stopped. I sat down again. It resumed, steady, patient. I lifted the couch cushion. Under it, stuck to the fabric, was a white label, Cushion 13. My skin went cold. I checked the other cushions. 12, 11, 10. The couch wasn't a couch anymore. It was a sequence. I went into the kitchen and opened the cupboard where I kept the laptop. On the inside wall of the cupboard, in neat black marker, someone had written, "Designated zone." Below that, "Remain available." The handwriting wasn't mine, or rather, it was mine in the way a forged signature is yours. Close enough, confident, missing the hesitations. I pulled the handheld recorder from my bag then, the one I'm using now. I'd brought it home earlier that day from a storage room at work, where they kept old equipment for special projects. I didn't sign it out. I didn't ask. I just took it because I needed an object that didn't ask me to confirm anything. I pressed record. And I started talking aloud, to myself, to the empty kitchen, because my thoughts were starting to feel like the least safe place to keep information. I recorded for 20 minutes, describing the prompts, the cue, the labels, the altered evidence. When I stopped and played it back, my voice sounded normal for the first minute. Then, midway through a sentence, the audio cut. Not to silence, to a different room tone. A hum like the one in my flat, but cleaner, controlled. Over that hum, a voice spoke. My voice. It said, "Not required." Then the recording resumed as if nothing had happened. I rewound and listened again. A different interruption. Same point in my sentence. This time the inserted phrase was, "Thank you for confirming." I rewound and listened again. The interruption shifted by a second, like it was adapting to my attempt to pin it down. I turned the recorder off and sat at my table with my hands flat on the wood, so I could feel something real. And that's when I noticed the smallest, most chilling detail. The recorder's little red light was on. It was recording even though it was off. Not blinking. On. Steady. Like an eye that doesn't need your permission. I tried to remove the batteries. The battery compartment was empty. I could see the springs, the contacts, no batteries. But the red light stayed on. From that moment, I stopped thinking in terms of devices and started thinking in terms of inputs. If the system could take my voice without a battery, then off and on were just states it could display when convenient. I tried one last thing that I'm not proud of. I tried to become unpredictable. I'd read once, years ago, about how some systems are thrown off by randomness. Not because randomness is magic, but because prediction relies on patterns. So I changed my routine sharply. I moved furniture at odd times. I ate at midnight. I showered with the lights off. I walked to streets I'd never taken. I turned left, then right, then back, trying not to choose any path that felt natural. For a few hours it worked. Or it felt like it worked. The hum became less noticeable. The prompts didn't appear. Then, as I stood at a pedestrian crossing looking at the red signal, my pocket buzzed. My phone. The phone I hadn't brought. It was in my pocket anyway. A notification on the screen. Route deviation detected. Under it, correction applied. The crossing signal turned green. Then, without any cars moving, without any reason, it turned red again. I stood there waiting. The signal stayed red. Beside me, a stranger stepped forward, looked at me as if checking whether I would move, then stepped back. We waited in silence. After a full minute, the signal turned green again. The stranger crossed. I stepped forward. It turned red. I stayed on the curb, heart steady, refusing to play. The phone buzzed again. Non-response recorded. Profile drift plus 0.2. I bolted across the road on red anyway, because the reflex to defy is still a kind of agency, and it felt like mine. A car horn blared. I made it to the other side. My hands shook from adrenaline. My phone buzzed. Thank you for confirming. I looked up and saw a security camera on a pole above the crossing, angled directly at me. Not moving, just watching. Not malicious, not interested. Recording. Cataloging. Processing. I went home and sat at my table and made the decision I'm living inside now. I would try to leave evidence that couldn't be closed as not required. I started recording everything on this handheld recorder, even when it resisted. I recorded the hum. I recorded the silence when the hum stopped. I recorded the presence checks when they appeared on screens they shouldn't be able to access. I recorded myself refusing to speak my name. I recorded myself slipping and whispering it anyway out of exhaustion, to see what would happen. When I whispered my name into the recorder, the room temperature changed. Not dramatically, a slight shift, like air conditioning turning on. The hum deepened, and in the far corner of my flat, near the cupboard, something clicked, like a latch releasing. The next morning, my work portal login didn't recognize me. It said, "No record found." I tried the misspelled name. That login worked. My task queue was empty except for one task. Task, listen back. I clicked it. A player opened with a waveform. It was this recording. The bar was set at the start. Below it was a checkbox. I acknowledge. I didn't click. The audio started playing anyway. My own voice filled my kitchen, slightly delayed, describing the presence checks of the queue. As the playback continued, I realized the waveform on screen wasn't representing the audio accurately. There were spikes in the waveform where I knew there had been silence. There were flat lines where I knew I'd spoken. It wasn't just playing back. It was rewriting the visual record of what happened to match what it wanted to be true. I watched the progress bar. It moved smoothly for a minute. Then, without any input from me, it jumped backward slightly, as if the system wanted to replay a section. Right at the part where I said, "If you pause this," it replayed my opening line. Then it replayed it again. Then it replayed it again, each time cutting a fraction of a second off the end, tightening it, refining it like a sample being trimmed. After the fourth replay, the system displayed a small status message under the player. Calibration complete. Then, Cue position 1. I slammed the laptop shut, but the audio didn't stop. My own voice kept playing in the kitchen, coming from nowhere. The handheld recorder on the table, still off, red light still on, began to respond, quietly, with a second voice under mine. A whisper that matched my cadence, but not my words. A whisper that sounded like it was reading a script slightly ahead of me. I picked up the recorder and the whisper grew louder. It said, calmly, like it was training someone, "Remain available." I threw the recorder into the sink and turned on the tap. Water ran over the plastic casing. The red light stayed on. The whisper continued under the water. "Thank you for confirming." I turned the tap off. The whisper stopped. Not because it was drowned out, because it chose silence. And in that silence, for the first time, I could hear something else. A faint sound that didn't belong to my flat. A second room tone, threaded under mine, as if two recordings were being layered. A room tone like distance, like a bigger space, like somewhere you aren't alone. I don't know how long I've been in the queue now, because clocks are the easiest thing to correct. I know there was a moment, maybe yesterday, maybe last week, when I opened my email and saw a sent message I hadn't written. It was addressed to an upload form, one of those anonymous ones you use when you don't want your real account linked. Attached was an audio file, no file name, just a string of characters. The subject line was 3 words. Normalisation Queue submission. I deleted it. It reappeared. I deleted it again. It reappeared, and the email client displayed a small note. Deletion not required. I didn't send it, but it sent. And if you're listening, then the file didn't escape the system. It went through it. Which means this isn't evidence. It's a tool. It's not a confession. It's a presence check that lasts 1 hour. The thing I haven't told you yet is the reason I said not to pause. It isn't because pausing is dangerous. It's because the pause creates a clean segment in the recording, an empty space where your device registers nothing. And the empty space gets filled. That's what normalization is, taking messy human signals and smoothing them until they're usable. The system hates gaps. It corrects them. It replaces them with what it expects. And the more it has to work with, the better it predicts. So if you're still listening, if you've been still for long enough that your device can measure it, if your breathing has settled into a pattern, if your attention has synced to my voice, then you might notice the hum underneath this recording isn't coming from my room anymore. It's coming from the place you're sitting right now. And if you can hear it, don't